he asked Christopher Luxon, what is the amount of your income that you should be spending on rent? So that's the question posed to Chris Luxon, and this was the response. We go full screen. This is the response from Chris Luxon.
Well, look, I mean, that's a debate and is actually a little bit about individual circumstances. What I can tell you is that, rent has gone up, $150 extra per week to rent the same house you had 4 years ago. And a lot of that is a function of, even if you just look in the last year, the government was advised, hey, listen, don't actually extend that bright line test, don't remove interest deductibility because it will lead to higher interest rates. That's what the Inland Revenue Department advised the government to do. And lo and behold, since those two measures have come in place, we've had another $50 added to weekly rent. But there are other things we should be doing, Ryan. We should be able to bring in developers that do
totally. I want to talk about
elements and stuff like that.
Totally.
So we'll pause there because we do have another clip to play. So that was the first question that Ryan Bridge asked. And I have to be honest, normally I'm not a fan of, asking John Key or the Prime Minister or whatever, so how much is a 2-litre bottle of milk? And if they can't get it down within like 3 cents of the price, you're out of touch. How much is it to take a bus, one fare from Dunedin Central to... I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff normally. However, in this situation, when you've got a political party coming out and criticizing the government, fair call, that's their job to do it, and saying it's going to be better under them as a proposed body to run the country, it is completely appropriate to say how much better. And actually, if we're saying cost of living is too much, how much better will it be under you? Like that $50 a week rent, how much better will it be when you're in? And I actually don't think, I don't know is an acceptable answer based on what you've been saying they're doing wrong. Like if I come out and I say, my cricket team is so much better than your cricket team and they're going to annihilate you. How much will they beat you by? I don't know. But they will. Yeah, but why is your cricket team better than my cricket team? Well, they just are. What I can assure you though is the other team is worse. But why is yours better? No. Well, but the thing about it is the other team's so much worse. And that's kind of what happens with opposition politics at times. What they do a lot is they point towards how bad the other side are, and they're not often called on to say, well, explain to us how good you will be. And that's what Ryan Bridge did. I'll play the second clip. He got into more detail, did Ryan Bridge, and again, kudos to him for this line of questioning. And he asked specifically how much will rent drop, because Chris Luxon has just cited $50 a week increase. Got that? Fine. So how much? You're criticizing them and you're giving them a dollar figure it's increased. So under you, how much will it decrease? Completely appropriate, fair question.
Look, Ryan, I can't tell you that, but what I can tell you is we've got to work much harder at trying to get rent down. And so it's about rental supply. It's about a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, but you've come out quite strongly, haven't you, on housing and particularly the cost of living. And you said that you can do a better job than Labor. So you're telling me you don't even know how much cheaper rent would be for people?
What I'm saying to you, Ryan, is that the essentials across New Zealand, whether it's power, food, rent, everything is going up. It's through the roof. And it's because the government has let inflation take root in this economy.
But you've announced policies though, Chris. How much would those rents come down as a result of them?
Yeah,
Ryan, I can't tell you that. And I'm not.
Why not? Why not? Have you asked economists what impact your policies would have on rents?
All I'm saying to you, Ryan, is there's a number of things that we could be doing to improve rent, as there is a number of
I'm
things.
not going to say any of them, but there's a number.
There is a number of things that we should be doing to improve social and state housing as well.
Totally. I totally understand that. But I think, Chris, that people at home will be wanting to know quite specifically from you, because they've heard a lot from governments of all different colours. They'll be wanting to know quite specifically. So your interest deductibility rules, for example.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. We'll go on. Something that I missed out on, and maybe it's on the other clip we should play it. When asked about the percentage of income, I'm just going to play this again because this is a part of our conversation.
Totally. I want to talk about some of those things, but just coming back to the question, because there's a lot of people now who are looking at you as a potential Prime Minister. And these are people who perhaps were voting for the Labor Party, who are worried about their cost of living, and a good chunk of them are going to be renters. What's a reasonable percentage of your income to be spending on rent? do you think?
Well, look, a lot of people would say, look, it needs to be around, 35%, 40% living costs as a proportion.
So that's just what I wanted to put out there. So because he did settle on a number, and I think that's important to put out there, 35, 40%. Now, I think we can all assume he pulled that number out his ass because 40% is really high. And this is where part of the conversation that we're going to go on with. But first, Chewy, your response to Chris Luxon.
Famously, National, the party of renters. Good to hear that. Look, my whole thing with them talking about the cost of living's up and Labor's doing us all wrong. Cost of living's up globally because we're in the middle of COVID. There's so many things. There's so many factors that affect prices here in New Zealand, and there's only some of them that we can affect. I think if he was to go, hey, look, National's going to come in and we're going to change the cost of living, they would be looking at food. That's something that we can, like a government at a national level could have an impact on. We were talking the other week about the Commerce Commission's recommendations for supermarket competition. We produce a hell of a lot of food and we're paying export prices or above. I saw a tweet this morning of a central London waitress selling iceberg lettuce for 79p, and it was being described as expensive, whereas here it'd be like $4 something. Why is that when we make so much food? Is there something there a government could do? If there is something a government could do, I can't see National doing it.
It's worse than that because we're paying export prices and we're getting not export quality food. I've had cousins and friends and stuff come from Australia looking at the kiwi fruit that we have in our supermarkets. Go, what the fuck are those disgusting looking things? Because actually the export quality kiwi fruit gets sent overseas for that dollars, 100%. And then we pay similar sort of prices for tag 1, which is one below that, or even tag 2 fruit and veggies that are kept in this country. So it's even worse than the prices we're paying. It's the prices we're paying for the quality of the product that we're actually getting, which is lesser. I mean, if you own a business, no problems with the idea of you sending the best to the best price. But then when you charge other people the same sort of money for a more inferior product, I do have a problem with that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's Luxon's big thing is that, he was a CEO and he knows business and that sort of thing. Every time I've seen him in an interview, he flounders. And it's platitudes, and these are the things that Jacinda gets criticized for at times, just fluffy language more than anything. But Luxon does it as well. He just comes up with business fluff. When has rent ever gone down?
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point. I think that rent's not going to go down, and I think that what an opposition party does, no matter what color it is they basically do go, this other side is terrible. And again, look, props to Ryan Bridge, although if you have a look, we're not doing it today, at the conversation he had with Andrew Little a bit later in that same show, you can see how gentle he was being with Chris Luxon and how vitriolic he was being with Andrew Little. So, like, he said at the start of that interview, and congratulations on the poll numbers. I'm like, oh, Jesus, here we go again. But in saying all of that, the questions he asked were good. They were appropriate. And I think they've exposed, and I'll just say the kind of hypocrisy and nonsense of an oppositional party rather than necessarily this oppositional party, because they all do it. Let's be honest. And one of the reasons they do it is they don't have to provide policy. They can't make policy. But when you poke the bear and go, if you're going to be so much better, tell us how, they also can't. And what they'll come out saying, and I think it's fair, but it does show the lunacy of how this all works, is, well, we're not going to reveal all that yet. That's what you do in the 3 to 6 months leading up to the election. If we start talking about that stuff now, then they're basically saying the other guys can steal our ideas. But still, to come out of that is one thing. I do want to move this conversation into the second part of what we're talking about with housing. And sure, you haven't been involved in this part yet, but me and George, I don't know if we debated this morning, George, but we certainly had an interesting to and fro about what this all means. So here's the question, and we don't have an answer to this, by the way, right? But look, here in what we're doing in BHN, I'm more than happy to put out questions and thoughts and go hunting for the answers ourselves. Hunting for this answer, we'll probably have someone on, an MP on tomorrow to talk about it. We've already contacted the Māngere budgeting Services Trust to see if they can help us find out this answer, because so often the devil is in the detail. And before we go into this conversation, I'll give you an idea. When I was working as a talkback host on News Talk ZB, the common belief because of the media was, those migrants who are pushing up the prices of housing and land, they're making the price of housing go through the roof. We only didn't sell internationally. Now, obviously, we haven't had migrants in the last 2 years, and the housing prices have gone through the roof. So that, for a current context, eliminates that issue. But even of the day, and I'm talking 10 years ago, all you needed to do was look at the numbers, and there was something like 1 to 1.5% of sales going to foreign nationals. The other 97, 98, 99% of sales were going to New Zealand citizens. What it basically was, especially in Auckland, was people going, shit, look at all the Asians here buying houses. Look at all these foreign nationals. Yep. What it was is actually New Zealand citizens of Asian ancestry, but the racial undertones of that was all these fucking foreign nationals buying the houses. So it actually was a complete lie. It wasn't accurate in the data. It wasn't accurate in the statistics. And it's still not today, as has been proven with 2 years of COVID, with the house prices going up. So I like to get into the numbers and the data to see if what we're being told is accurate. The question I have at the moment is really around the rental crisis and the housing affordability crisis. Now, make this clear. I'm not saying there's not one. I'm saying I want to have a look at the data and see what it is. So what we started today was an in-depth investigation. Hey, George, is that what we're saying? In-depth investigation into how much we're paying to rent our houses. Now, Chris Luxon said, he answered the question, what's an amount of your income to be spending on rent? Now, that says to me, amount of an income says to me an individual's income. However, George has found out through looking around that the world marker, that Goldilocks spot, which is about 30% of your income, is based on household income. Now, the reason we need clarity on that is at the moment in New Zealand, the average salary, so the average income is $58,000. This is 2022, $836, $1,100 a week. Obviously, 30% of that is very different from the current household income, which is $110,451. 30% of the average salary is going to be, $18,000, some around about. 30% of that is going to be $33,000. So that's one of the things we're going to investigate with. But in saying that, based around what Christopher Luxon said this morning, where he talked about 40% of, quote, your income, I've taken that to mean of an individual's income. So if we have a look at this, $1,000, let's call it $1,100 a week, 40% of that's going to be about $440 a week. So now we ask the question, if the average earner is $1,100, that means 40% of that, the average rent would be $440. If we use $440 average a week as rent, do we have a rental crisis? Now, yes, there are places around the country where it's more than that. But in saying that, there are also places around the country where it's less than that. This is recent information on rents in Dunedin, for example. I don't know why I picked Dunedin. It's just a fantastic place to be. I've gone through and I've taken the average house, because we're talking about averages. I've added up all the average houses for 2 and 3 bedroom prices in all these suburbs in Dunedin, and I've divided it by the number of houses there, and it comes out at $390.27. So it appears to me that the average rent in Dunedin is about $390 that's for a 2 or 3 bedroom house. Of course, there's going to be 1 bedroom houses where it might be cheaper. There's going to be 5 bedroom houses where it's going to be more expensive. So that says to me that if this is the case, and if we're talking about individual income, and if we're using that 40% marker, then maybe the solution is to figure out a way to get more people to move to places where rent's already more affordable, rather than figuring out a way to drop house prices and rents where it's already currently not. Maybe that's a solution. So, and if it's based on household income, and it's $33,000 a year, which is over $600, then most places in the country are already at 40%. One more thing before I get off my soapbox. It's not a soapbox, because I'm genuinely wanting to find out. Is 40% is also incredibly high. I think, George, you'll agree from our looking around, the OECD and most countries in the world seem to think that 30% is about the Goldilocks. So 30% of income. Now, if that means if it's individuals' income, then yes, in Dunedin it's 39%, or sorry, 35%. If it's household income, 30% is going to be, as I said, $33,000 or $600 a week. So there you go. You guys go.
It's definitely household income, because that's what Statistics NZ are basing all these numbers off, and that's the information that politicians are getting. I think that this is why we have to have this conversation that you wanted to have, Pat, is because because politicians will often deploy the facts and logic and the stats, but it's how they're presented and the lack of detail, or how the detail is skewed, that often tells the story, right?
I mean, I've got to say, I've always taken that 30% thing as a personal number.
And do you mean individual when you say personal?
Yeah, individual. Just because from being a student and living in a flat, you don't think about the total. You think about what you're paying. And certainly when I was in Wellington, I would have been up around 50% of my take home. Certainly went on rent. It's part of the reason I'm in Dunedin now.
Yeah, that's the other problem with household income, right? Is it's not telling those sorts of stories. But yeah, 47% of the country is above the 30% thing. And just by the way, 30%, that number is it's from America. It's how the government in America decides if a household is housing cost burdened or not. And it's how universities like Harvard and that sort of thing decide if an area is housing cost burdened. So that's where it's come from, and it seems to be made its way into all sorts of other areas of policy.
So let me just jump back in here for a sec, yeah. And I'm saying because I think this is going to be a few days conversation. We'll probably continue this on tomorrow with some experts, because we're not. If it is household income, and I accept that that's what it is around the world, right? That's what they use around the world. And this is the other thing we wanted to say. If Christopher Luxon is citing 40% as an acceptable amount of income to be spending on housing, right? So that's his number, not the OECD number, right? So that's based on 110,000 there that you're looking at. That's $846 a week. So when I say, is there a housing crisis? What I'm saying is, based on what Christopher Luxon said this morning, 40% at $110,000 income, if that's numbers we're using, then we don't have a rental issue in New Zealand. Because
if we're happy to base it all on averages of household income,
but that's how we have to do it. We can't talk about individuals here. It's like we talked about the other day.
No, but we can talk. We can specify it. We can look at regions. We can.
But what I'm saying, and be really clear, when I say that we don't have an issue in New Zealand, I'm not actually saying that. I'm saying based on these numbers, and I'm not saying that doesn't mean we don't have an issue for individual houses. I'm meaning across the country, looking at the crisis. What Christopher Luxon is saying is, if he's aiming for 40%, then according to the household income, we're already there. Well, actually, it's Christopher Luxon saying, based on 40% and the household income, that there's not an issue. That's the point I'm trying to make, which is why I'm saying he's pulled a number out of his ass, and 40% is too high. And actually, we need to look at the world sort of average, which is 30%, and then we need to figure out, is it 30% of the 110 or 30% of the average amount. So these are the things. And then you're right, George, I don't want to be seen to be some kind of capitalist shill saying everything's fine in housing, because for some people they're struggling massively and it's too expensive for them. But when you're looking at making legislation and you're making a decision for the whole of the country, you do have to, on some level, look at the average for people. Unless, of course, you then go to means testing and go, what's happening in Auckland? How do we provide solutions in Auckland? And as I said, maybe the solution, rather than trying to tamp down rents in Auckland, is figuring out ways to encourage people to go to, maybe not even Hamilton, because that's probably up there, but Wellington, Dunedin, Tauranga, these sorts of places, maybe infrastructure, spend on infrastructure, turning these other cities into more attractive places to be and go, would be a good way to help with that, because it'll be a more attractive places for individuals to come and work, for businesses to move to and work. Maybe helping out. I mean, we've got a great port here in Dunedin. Our airport's pretty shit. Maybe those would be the kinds of things that overall would make cost of living better for individuals, rather than, and I'll be honest, what it feels like this bullshit conversation we always have about housing. When do you really fucking believe at any stage a landlord's going to decrease their rent for any reason? Oh, yeah, my mortgages have just gone up, by the way. My mortgage has just gone down. I'm going to pass it on to the tenant. You know, there'll be some altruistic landlords out there that will do that, but most won't. Most won't. Most will just take that extra profit and put it in their pocket. So
I remember from my renting days, the best you could hope for each year was to not have a rent increase.
Yeah.
Never that it was going down. It'd never go down. Never in a million years. So I think a politician that gets up there and goes, oh, we're going to tackle the cost of living by lowering rents, I think he's dreaming. And
he's dreaming, mate.
If landlords actually believe that, then National haven't got a shit show of getting in. So what's he really talking about? Or is he just saying things that he knows that people are going to like?
Yeah,
and
so this is oppositional politics, right? Now, I've said this for a long, long time. You get to a point in the election cycle where people go, it's time for a change. And it doesn't actually matter why it's time for a change. They just get a vibe that it's time for a change. But what I've always said to people, and this is not in support of the current government at all, but the equal and opposite is also true. It's better the devil you know. Better the devil you know is completely as valid as it's time for a change. But for some reason, voters the world over get sick of a political party for whatever reason, and they then go, let's get some fresh blood in there. And I'll be honest with you, when has the national government ever done anything to help renters and to help make cost of living more affordable for those at the bottom? We didn't even get into the comments that Luxon made the other day about bottom dwelling and bottom dwellers. So, you know, I want us to be honest with and have the information to make our decisions. That's really what it is. And if there is a housing crisis, and I'm saying if, not because I'm being naive, because I kind of think there is, because I hear people talking about it, but I still want to drill into the data and have a look what that's saying versus what everybody in, you know, Mosgill's saying, because their housing prices is too expensive or it's gone up by 80%. Because anecdotal evidence, individual evidence is not necessarily represented in the data. I want to look at the data, and that's what we're going to do about housing. I don't know, maybe over the next 18 months, but certainly we're going to chase this bone for a few days.